Good morning, good evening to you, beautiful friends. It surely has been a minute, hasn't it? Life has been lifing, and it's been great. Nobody likes braggart, and obviously there is a lot going on in the world, but I think that is so much of why I choose to continue to kind of do this and, live, exist so countercurrently to society and then just speak on it, just share my thoughts and my observations. And it's really interesting because to just not necessarily support a narrative of conventional positivity in a lot of ways can perhaps be perceived as aggressive, assertive, and a million and one different things. I really don't know when we got along this crazy narrative that, like, to challenge or to disagree was a negative thing. And funnily enough, I think so much of my journey has actually been about stepping back because I'm a critical thinker. So, without even meaning to, a lot of times just because of the way that I see things, because I can't ever just see one thing as one thing. And funnily enough, like, neither do you. Nobody does. We are all so smart, but like in these moments of duress and conflict, we dumb ourselves down because we focus on the narrative that is driven by what we're feeling. And it's not exactly true, even though it's the truth that we're experiencing. And so I've taken a lot of time back because like a step back time just to myself. Engaging with people nowadays is it's very tricky because a lot of people aren't even necessarily aware of the ways that, like, they filter or project their experience onto the world and don't even understand that, like, yes, their reality is their reality, but it's a part of this bigger co-creative reality. It's really funny because someone who, for all intents and purposes, I should have had a relationship with for the rest of our lives. We've gone our separate ways. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I will ever speak to this person again. I've given them a lot of grace and forgiveness, and I forgive them and I love them. But time and time again, and my observations aren't the be all end all, to be clear, but just through the behaviors that they choose to incorporate, I would just observe as, toxic, if you will. And of course, people can change, but that doesn't even inherently necessarily mean that you want to align. But I'm already getting really, I digress too far. Truth. We were having a conversation about truth, and this person is definitely able to stick to well, this is my narrative and this is my reality, so this is the truth. And it blows my mind because, of course, we all want to think that we're intelligent and we all want to think that we're this and that and respectful, but it's very telling, quite literally, in if we are able to kind of make that deduction and that observation, i.e., this is my reality, but is this the be all end all, or is this part of a bigger picture? And as someone who's always been a bit of a critical thinker, I can't even tell you how often I find myself at odds with people. And so, like, disagreement, like even disagreeing to understand. I have a very interesting viewpoint on disagreeing. So you understand until you don't, and that's where disagreement comes in. And sometimes we have to be able to disagree until we can agree again. It's part of fine-tuning the narratives. Shout out to my partner because, life is very, very interesting. And things are oftentimes very unexpected, plot twists, just all of this. For those of you struggling and those of you going through hard times, first and foremost, never say never. And second, just you are exactly where you're meant to be. And I am sorry if it's not necessarily enjoyable, but I give my testimony often. In fact, if you go and watch other videos, that's quite often what I do. I speak on it. And funnily enough, this is where I am learning to be very mindful of how I speak and whatnot. But I, at one point, even talked about how I didn't know if I would necessarily ever be in a romantic relationship again. It certainly wasn't something I was seeking. It wasn't something I was looking for. I was completely focused on only being, friends because of all of the work and just all of the energy that comes with partnership and being, a mindful, conscious partner. And so I wasn't looking for that. And I didn't even know that I would want to do that again, in all honesty. And then, funnily enough, was just in a moment of adversity, and the universe just kind of happens the way it happens. I was super challenged, and then somebody whom I didn't ever necessarily anticipate speaking to again reached back out, and yeah, here we are. And so it is just, it's so important just to be mindful of the energies that we are exerting, if that makes sense. Especially because, truths. That was in kind of agreeing to disagree. That was a point of contention with my partner and I previously, in ways that we needed to kind of work on ourselves to show up and talk and communicate, being on track and understanding and sharing that resonance and that understanding until perhaps there's a differentiation, deviation. So just truth, relatability, the way that we speak to people, and then just again incorporating that. And I say that because I am someone with very strong opinions. In fact, if you look at my comments, it's very unfortunate because in just trying to share some critical thought, or perhaps trying to remind people that, there is no such thing as a singular narrative, and even the way anything is existing, it doesn't just exist that way, only ever. And, maybe we should perhaps all not necessarily, again, it's very interesting. Our feelings drive our experience. They drive our truth. Like, this is psychology. Google this. Please research this. Because even when I communicate it well, you're still only going to take certain things. And I want you to understand as best as you can understand as you. And that's the whole point, is you've got to be the best you. Because everything that we've done in this world so far, as far as I see it, not to be awful, again, girl versus world, but it's all cockapoo. Because things have been monetized, so even the best of the best, it's never been a level playing field. And it's a lot of narcissism, and it's a lot of greed, and it's a lot of sickness. And so much of my life, because of other people's weights and projections, have always kind of been on the fringes, to be completely honest with you, because I don't, so bullying, we don't like bullies, right? But then how come everybody's really mean to nerds? And I say, again, as a huge nerd, as someone who just loves to study and loves to think, trying to unpack ideas with people oftentimes because of the emotional regulation techniques, or just because of the way dialogue and conflict even can come to be, and how fragile egos are, how we're not necessarily able to emotionally regulate. How can people think that our world is right and healthy and hale and successful? People can't even necessarily disagree at this point without it becoming some major dialogues. The Olympics is a great one. I don't mean to sound icky, but we literally cannot stop threatening wars with each other. We compete for resources. So why is everybody sitting here like this human Westminster dogfish show and just supporting this lie and this rhetoric? We forget that Nazis, for example, fascism, nationalism, the ways that we do things we don't really question, with everything going on, unfortunately, with, the Epstein files. I don't like being right about this, and most of celebrity being disgusting and whatnot, but it's, we really need to sit and think about the part that we are playing And I'll give you a great example. I'm going to go really sideways here. And shout out to the random white dude that I saw doing this, because I tell you what, I'm like, you know what, if he can do this, I can do this. The caucasity of it all. It is older white dude approved, so I'm gonna use that. Thank you, Uncle, Grandpa, random guy. But I was at the gas station, and I saw him once using the wiper fluids to kind of clean his car off. And so I was going to get gas, and I was going to get a car wash, and call me cheap, call me whatever you want. $10 for a car wash. Like, are you serious? So no, better things for me to spend my money on because of inflation, and call it whatever you want. A lavender fog latte, oat milk. I could get one of those instead. So I followed Uncle Grandpa and decided to wash my car with that. And a woman next to me is just like, well, that's one way to wash your car. And passive aggressive. There's a lot, maybe it's me because I have an up and evil thing, but I'm just thinking, what the hell? Like, first, like, what? Say, like, obviously you felt the need to, why do you feel the need to say something? Is this really like, wow, cool, I never thought of that? Or is this like a mark on like the cheat? Like, why do you feel the need to ingratiate yourself in my, like, mind your business, lady, mind your business. So I was just like, yeah, and so me being me, I decided to make it a teachable moment. I'm like, we all whine and complain about the cost of inflation and what have you. So it's on us to take these steps. I don't necessarily want to waste water for the environment. This is here. A lot of people don't necessarily use it anyway. I'm being mindful when I do it to squeegee so that I'm not getting the water incredibly dirty. Why not? She's like, no. And then and then I got to play with her dogs, and it was lovely. We had a great moment. So there's a lot there, obviously, including me and my attitude problem. But again, the way that we people, like, am I making it a thing? Is it a cultural difference? Because, I'm in the Midwest, and she was of, European descent, if you will, or European presenting, because not to sound like an idiot, actually, at powwow, I've had friends who literally look like they stepped off of a boat fresh from Ireland. So we shouldn't, colorism it's so interesting. We should not be so ignorant as to judge a book by its presenting color, and that's something that I work on a lot, to be honest with you, especially because as someone who has a lot of feelings about colonialist and imperialist systems, it is so important, especially now more than ever, to use that language instead of maybe saying WPs, because it's not all WPs. For example, we have to ourselves be mindful of potentially the stereotypes and generalizations that we can be perpetuating. And again, the ignorance, just the things that we're normalizing. I talked about bullying and nerds, because that is, funnily enough, nerds are kind of one of the biggest ones. And I think that could stem into a lot of my beef with, like, media. I have gone off in previous videos just in media, but I think it goes deeper, honestly, just to even tribalization and storytelling and the responsibility, because that which we create is medicine, and how we do it is so important, i.e., it's a lot of times poison. Because let's say that I'm having a disagreement with my partner, and let's say that I come and decide to unpack it on YouTube to maybe have the cult of popular opinion, which is something I would never do, although I have gotten their permission to use anecdotes and, their blessings, so that is lovely. Especially in another dialogue with a former, who funnily enough was a performer themselves, and quite literally talked about how they needed to be on social media and basically for the streets to help build their brand. I'm very, very selective in that, and actually when I'm using personal anecdotes, will try to get people's permission and consent, for the most part, if I'm going to delve into deep things. And I've gone kind of sideways, but shoot, and I lost my train of thought anyway. So on that note, if I were to, just come on here and unpack and then try and, just get opinion or get viewpoint and whatnot, is that to a certain extent, sure, it can be medicine because it's healing and I'm getting perspective and point of view, but that's poisoned our relationship, because again, why am I not working on these things with my partner? Why am I letting other people into our energy? So, just that amongst other, how we do what we do matters. I.e., I had a dialogue with, on an astrology post. Funnily enough, one of the things that I never would have thought I would have gotten necessarily heated discourse. Actually, I've had a few, because one person commented on my sun sign, but this person, I was just talking about, colonization and gentrification. And this person, being quite literal in their book interpretation, decides to come on and think that they're going to teach me, etc., and try and tell me how I'm wrong. And this is something that, as a loving call into other people moving forward, and I have been guilty of this myself. But if perhaps we aren't understanding something, and that's again the first clue, if we're disagreeing, as opposed to inherently, well, this is wrong, and this is something I have done, funnily enough, I would be a big perpetuator of like questioning. And I would suggest, question, well, are you suggesting yada yada, or, well, I failed to see this, etc. And this person was just so rude as I saw it. Just, that's wrong. If the definition of blah, blah, blah is so and so, how can this da 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 that you say is da da da? And it's just, I'm so grateful for the place I'm at, honestly. I know at the beginning I was talking about life is lifing, and that's probably why I haven't made videos. I've just been busy, like, being happy and doing things. But, to just be at a place, because I've been pegged as like a keyboard warrior and, a troll, and that's never ever my thing. Anytime I'm commenting on content or feeds, it's just that people create content to engage. I'm engaging. Questions, comments, concerns, just what have you. I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I see things and I'm speaking on what I see. And it's very interesting how in seeing things so differently, a lot of times people will want to sue for like a discourse. Again, the places that we're at, girl versus world. So that's why I haven't necessarily been unpacking a lot of things. But I did just want to come and speak on that as a loving reminder, because times are very trying right now, if you will, amongst so many other things. There is so much change in the world. We as individuals are starting to reclaim our power and our agency, and it's just a loving reminder that you have every right to live a life that makes sense to you and you alone. Do as you will and harm none. Or if you want to harm people and that's your way, go for it. But as someone who just celebrated another birthday, I would just say everybody gets theirs. Nothing that we ever have taken from us is not replaced by something much better. And everything that we take, if we don't need it especially, is a recompense, just all of it. I see it. Karma will raise you so high just to knock you down, and then she will raise you back up again. And, at the end of the day, we are the effect that we have on other people. That is our legacy, truly. And that's what I was reminded of, just, this gigantic plot twist. So just be mindful of how you're doing what you're doing, because, yeah, I'll definitely probably question you if we have some things, and it might seem like it's girl versus world, but I'm just trying to understand, because I love you, and I want you to love yourself enough to be healthy and hale. I used to be bad about it, honestly, like, gosh, question my opinion. Whoo! Let me think that you don't understand me. Nowadays, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna go be happy. You can come over here if you want to at some point. I'm loving you guys this day and always, and just keep on keeping on. We are changing the world.